little delay. My name is Julio Bonis. I will present you in this webinar what have been we working on. The title of this webinar, that is automating vendor due diligence for artificial intelligence systems. The webinar will have a duration of about 30 minutes. This is the agenda. So first we will go through the vendor due diligence bottleneck. What is the problem we are trying to solve? Then we will go through a brief real-world demo of the current Pacific AI tool to solve this problem. And then we will talk about what we call the intelligent auditor pipeline and the Pacific AI brain, how this system works. And finally, you will have the opportunity to make any question and comment that you want. So what is the problem that we are trying to solve? Many of you know that in the last years, a lot of companies are trying to acquire or to incorporate artificial intelligence systems, and that means they will need to deal and work with partners or providers that are offering different solutions. And one of the issues that many people is facing is that those vendors, in some cases, are new to the industry. So typically, companies have never worked before with some of these vendors, and that means in highly regulated industries and in many businesses, someone will need to review if the vendors are valid to work with, and basically. Someone will need to do this procurement of vendors that takes a lot of time because it traditionally has been a very manual process. As the number of vendors offering AI is growing exponentially, we are seeing a bottleneck here. If any of you had tried to do a vendor procurement before, you know that the information that you need to collect to make sure that the vendor is reliable is scattered across different sources of information, in many cases unsupported information, and it's really not an easy thing to do. Typically, this has been tried to the approach to solve this problem has been to create some questionnaires or standardized formulas that you send to the vendor, and the vendor will fill these formulas, and then someone in the organization, if you are the things the right way, will check that the questions has been filled with the right answers, and that there are there are evidences that support whatever the vendor is promising you or telling you that is able to do. And so at the end, you end up with many questionnaires and many workloads that you need to do manually. There are two, well, we call two hidden problems. There are two things that usually get you into some difficulties. The first one is this assumption of the absence of evidence means that there is evidence of absence, meaning that if you don't find something, is because the vendor is not able to provide it. That is not exactly true. Sometimes you don't find something is not described in the documentation that the vendor shares with you, but it doesn't mean that the vendor is not able to fulfill that requirement. And the other one is that in many cases, and especially when we are talking about AI vendors, you can really assess what you don't know to ask. So in many organizations, the persons that are in charge of doing this vendor due diligence or vendor procurement, they are not really experts in artificial intelligence. They have never worked with vendors in this area. So in many cases, we have seen that people is lost in what they need to check, or how do they need to evaluate different vendors for this particular new technology. What is our vision? What we envision it and use this to build our tool in Pacific AI. We envision that this process must be automated somehow in some of the steps, and the process is basically as this slide is showing you. You start with a particular questionnaire, a particular set of questions or requirements that you consider are important for to check in for a vendor. You retrieve documents, or you ask the vendor to retrieve the documents. Then you need to ingest and organize the information that is included in those documents. That could be dozens of even hundreds of documents in some cases. And then you use that documents and the information that is included in those documents, that are the evidences, to try to answer the question of the that are included in the original question. With that, you typically will score the vendor with some kind of metric. Someone will review it, and then you will make different decisions. You can make the decision, okay, I go with this vendor A or this vendor B, or I go with this vendor C, but I implement some mitigations or controls to make sure that the risks that we have identified do not affect our operations of when working with this vendor. So this is, you can see, this is a cycle that we have automated somehow. You will see it during the demo. If you are able to automate the more manual or the most manual steps of this process, what you get at the end is more capacity to evaluate more vendors. That means you will evaluate vendors much better, and you will be able to evaluate more vendors and have more options to work with one or other vendors. Something that currently, if you don't have this well automated, you have this bottleneck that prevents you to benefit from working with several vendors. Let's go for a real-world demo of the system that we have implemented in Pacific AI that is currently deployed. So this is the login of Pacific AI tool that allows us to evaluate to do a risk management of different components in artificial intelligence projects. In other webinars, we have gone through risk assessment of systems. As you can see here, we have two systems in the tool, but today we will focus on how we evaluate vendors that are not particular systems, but are organizations or providers. Here, for our own organization, we will have, as you see, we will have a set of policies that we will cover in other webinars. And in this webinar, we will focus on vendors. Typically, your organization will work with different vendors, different providers. So you can create a vendor with all the details. This is nothing very special, just a database of vendors. And we are creating here, for instance, Acme Technologies LLC, that is one of our potential providers. So one important thing is that when you are evaluating a vendor, classically, most companies, this is a very slow process and takes a lot of time. You will try to evaluate a vendor once, and you will evaluate all vendors the same way. But when you automate this process partially, and you obtain more, more speed when evaluating vendors, you get to a point where you can evaluate the vendor depending on the system or the business case or the business scenario that you are working with. So you won't evaluate the vendor overall as a unique entity, but you evaluate the same vendor in different scenarios. And this is why it is very important, it is supported in our tool, that you link the vendor with the specific systems that this vendor is related with. This is how it's done in our tool. You can see we can link the vendor to a specific system, and all the evaluation, all the recommendations that you will see later will take into account this vendor is working for this in this particular scenario, or will support us in this particular system. Because it's not the same, for instance, if you are working in a system that will have access to patients' clinical records, that will require vendors with some specific capabilities. That is completely different than looking for a vendor that will support us into a website where we will publish marketing content, for instance. So even if it is the same vendor, depending on which system are you working with, you will have different requirements. So here we are linking the vendor with this particular system. You can link to one or many other systems, and of course you always will attach the vendor to someone in your organization that is in charge. This is what we call the internal owner. Once you have done that, you need to upload into the system any documentation that is related with the vendor in a general concept, not with a particular system that maybe the vendor is providing or offering you, but these will be documents that are related with the vendor as an entity. For instance, you can upload a certificate of liability insurance where you will find a lot of details that could be relevant when you are doing a risk assessment of a particular vendor, if they are covered for commercial liability. In these examples, we see how in this certificate we can read that the artificial intelligence or machine learning systems are excluded from the coverage of this liability. That is something that is very relevant if you are working with this vendor in a system that includes artificial intelligence, and it's something that takes time to identify. But as you will see, an LLM-based system is able to identify with a high accuracy. So those are these kind of documents that you will upload, and the system will use when doing the risk assessment for you. So you have now the certificate of insurance, and of course you will have dozens of documents, financial statements, information about the team, any information that is relevant when you are evaluating a vendor can be uploaded to the system. PowerPoints, PDFs, docx, Excel files, even websites that are scrapped. You can upload everything here. You see, now we have a long list of documents for Acme Technologies. So once we have uploaded all the information about the vendor and link it to the specific systems we plan to work with, the next step is to do the risk assessment. This in classical situations, without using a platform like this one, it will mean someone will need to review a lot of this documentation, to check the different evidences, and then to fill a lot of paper, to do a lot of paperwork, and to do a final report and to get a score that the decision makers can use for making informed decisions. In the case of our tool, once you have uploaded the information, and given the fact that you have linked the vendor to the specific systems that this tool has also evaluated, so now has knowledge about how the system works, what are the risks of the systems. You have also uploaded your policies that contains information about the requirements that your organization wants to cover for working with any vendor or working with any AI system. So that will allow allows this tool to suggest you, okay, given this vendor characteristics, the systems you are planning to work with, and your internal policies, we have a catalog of questionnaires, and the system will suggest you, okay, these are the the questionnaires or the assessments that we believe you should perform on this vendor for this particular business scenario. You see here that there's a list of six of these questionnaires. So we can decide as a human, the risk manager typically, we can decide, okay, I will go for this data governance and privacy assessment for the vendor. You create it, and automatically you see how this questionnaire is composed by 10 questions. You see in the icon in gray, and the system will automatically go through all the documentation that has been ingested and will try to answer the questions. So this typically takes few seconds, less than a minute. In virtually all the cases we have tried. You will get you see here, now we have a score, but we can go to the details of the questionnaire, and you see how the system, our tool, has been able to answer in this case all the questions that are contained in this particular question about data governance. So you see how the system will tell you, okay, which HIPAA, the identification methodology is applied by this vendor, and it has found that the vendor is not using the identification, but is using just a limited data set that is they identified, but they don't have a robust identification process. So that means that we will score this particular question in the vendor as a minus 20 points. Of course, when we are talking about risk assessment, you will always require a human that will confirm that the answer to this question is correct. It will be the human will be able to do this because in the answer given by our tool, you see that we have an explanation of why this particular answer was selected, and we will have a link to the specific document or context where that evidence was found. So the human will confirm this, and that will become a confirmed answer. But in case the human considers that the suggestion of the tool is incorrect, or the human has more context or want to change it, of course you always can change the answer, in this case about the capability to remove individual data traces. So here we are changing the original suggestion by the tool, and we are incorporating our own justification or notes explaining why did we change this automated answer, automated generated answer. So after this process that takes minutes, when before or without this tool it could take hours, in this case it takes minutes. You will have the risk assessment for data governance, where you have 9 questions that have been suggested by the tool directly by artificial intelligence methods. One of the questions has been edited by a human, so we now have the 10 questions answered. So we can provide with the final score regarding how this vendor, what is the risk of this vendor related with data governance and privacy. You can do it for many other dimensions or many other questionnaires, and in some cases you will find that the AI system, after checking all the documents, won't be able to find the answer to a particular question. On that case, that will generate a list of pending of information, pieces of information that are pending to be provided by the vendor. So typically you will contact the vendor, and then you will focus just on these specific questions that cannot be answered with the documentation that the vendor has shared with you. This is how can we manually manually fill, or answer the question, a particular question that cannot be answered by checking the documentation with the AI system. At the end, what you will get for a particular vendor in a particular business scenario is a set of a global score that composed by a set of different dimensions. In this case, you see these 6 questions that we have used. This is a pretty bad or pretty high risk vendor, as you can see, based on the documents that we provided to the system. So you will have a risk level high for this vendor. Let's imagine we upload another synthetic example where we generated a company called Top Engineers that is a very, very capable company. So we can, again, we will link to the system. The tool will suggest us this is the list of questions that you need to use, and we will automatically run the evaluation, fill the gaps in case there are gaps, and we will end up with a new evaluation, as you can see here. And this, in this case, this vendor looks much more reliable, so less risky than the previous vendor. And then you can compare with the tool. I don't have the slide here, but you can compare, different vendors for a particular system or particular project. You can get a view of how the different vendors were evaluated, and then you can make the decision. In this case, we will have one company that is low risk, and a company, Acme, that is high risk. So typically, the people making the decision which vendor should we work with, usually they will work with the Top Engineers, let's say, or if they decide to work with Acme Technologies because just for whatever business reason, price or other strategic considerations, this tool is able also to. It helps you to manage, okay, we will have this Acme Technologies vendor, but we want to implement this particular mitigation controls. And in the tool, this is something that I don't have in the slide. In the tool, these lists of mitigation controls are associated with these Acme vendors, and you can follow up and upload evidences of, okay, we're following our mitigation controls for Acme because it's a high risk vendor. So once we have seen very briefly how this idea of automation of vendor due diligence could work in a particular tool, in the specific AI tool, let's go deeper in how this works, so how we think this should work. The first approach that many people is doing to automate this kind of quality assessment or vendor risk assessment tasks is, okay, let's open ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or more recently Anthropic, Claude. Let's open a session here, write some prompts, and ask the system, okay, do a risk assessment of this vendor, and I'm touching you these documents, and I'm trying to solve the problem that way. That in our experience, it doesn't work too well, and we will see why. So we believe, and we have seen, that you need a more engineered approach. It's not just a question of prompting an LLM and trying to solve the problem, but you need a system with different components that will help you to do this job in the right way, as we can see. And we will go now through these different components very briefly. This is the architecture of Pacific AI tool for risk assessment, system risk assessment, vendor risk assessment, you name it. This is a complex system. No, it's not just an LLM. We use LLMs in some parts of the system, but you can see how we have, for example, in the bottom, we have a general assets registry where we will store in a machine readable way the different policies that you upload to the system. We have also a targeted system and targeted vendors assets registry, where all the documents that you upload about a vendor, in this case, will be extracted, and all the pieces of information will be organized and put in this assets registry. We also have, for example, a human in the loop registry, where any activity that the risk manager is doing in the system, approving, rejecting, modifying decisions, will be logged and auditable. That is very important in many industries. And we have other components that are specialized in doing a specialized task in the agentic execution plane, what we call, where we have several agents, LLM based, but also with some rule based business logic. And we have, for instance, the ingestion layer that is key in this vendor risk assessment. And of course, we have a central orchestrator that is, making sure that all these components are working coordinated, and that you are not redoing work that you don't need to rerun. That will save you a lot of time and a lot of money in terms of tokens if you are using LLMs. So doing just the tasks that are required is something very, very important, and providing the agents just with the context that they need and not all the context, that is critical, and that is something that is done by our central orchestrator. This is a simplified view of how is our architecture regarding the vendor risk assessment. You can see here we have the ingestion layer. We will store all the information about the vendor in a semantic vector store, and then we will have these agents and the orchestration on top of them to answer the question, select the questionnaires and find the answers to the questions automatically. And then of course you will have a human that will be reviewing, and all the activity of the human reviewer will be logged and audited. About the ingestion layer, you can upload, as I have said, PDF, docx, websites. There's an agent that is in charge of doing normalization. What we built inside the system is a hierarchical content tree, so you can feed with the relevant information or subsections of the information in a very efficient way, and store it in a semantic vector store. So basically, you go from unstructured content to searchable knowledge. Of course, we have also a component that works like the typical, as you know, typical RAG engine that allows us to find the relevant context for each of the questions. And we also have the questionnaire answering agent. And this is a very interesting component, because what we will provide is with the question with the different options. So we have some kind of deterministic output, and we will provide with the evidence that is most related with the question. And the reason agent, the first thing is it will provide with a deterministic answer. That is a key concept here. Won't just generate a paragraph of text saying, I think the vendor risk is low or high because this or that, but will as it is based on multiple choice questions, it will provide you with something that is deterministic, and then you can compare different vendors because you are answering the same questions to all the vendors. That's a key concept here. And the other thing is that it won't only give you the selected answer for the question, but will give you a sense of confidence that is key when you are evaluating, and will provide you with the evidence except, the content that has been used to answer the question, and the link to the document that has been used, or documents that has been used to answer the question. So basically, we are trying to reduce as much as possible the hallucination rates. This is the levels of confidence or evidence verification that we are using in our system. The highest confidence is when we directly find, a statement that answers the question. The second one is when we don't find a direct statement, but we can infer with the use of language models. We can infer the answer to the question, from context from different sources or from a white paper. And finally, we have this information gap level, where the system will tell what the system will return is, I didn't find any evidence in favor or or in contra to this question. So basically, I cannot answer the question, and that is key in AI systems. The ability to tell you, I don't know, I don't have the answer, because the information required to answer this question is not in the documentation that you have provided to me. That leads us to the importance of this clarification agent. We have a specific component in the system that is a clarification agent that will identify these gaps and will generate a list of requests, what we call requests for information. So that list of requests for information can be shared with the vendor. About what we have defined, we like to talk, we like to name it as the Pacific AI brain. Okay, a couple of ideas here. Typically in vendor procurement, what many companies has been doing for years is to have like kind of a static document. Could be a PDF, could be a Word, that someone will fill. That is very static and usually is the same document for all the vendors, or the same document for all the business scenarios. Some companies that do this a lot, they have like different documents for different situations, but at the end there are like documents that you fill and remain like that, are typically filled once a year, and that's all. In our tool, we have moved from this approach to what we call machine readable tree, where we will have the questionnaires that will be composed by different sections that we can link to categories, and inside these categories we will have different questions, and inside this question we will have different answer options that will be associated with predefining the scores. But these scores can change depending on the business scenario. So, for instance, in some scenarios, if the vendor is not HIPAA compliant, this is a huge risk, and in some cases it can prevent you to work with this vendor, because this is a hard requirement, this is a stopper. In other cases, being HIPAA compliant is nice to have, but this is it's not so important. That is codified in our system by the different scores. The other nice thing of this approach is that we can combine, and with the use of LLMs, this is becoming more easy to more achievable. We can recombine the questions to create very quickly different questionnaires that adapt to very unique and granular business scenarios. That means that what we are building is what we call expertise as a service. So this resource is growing every day. We have dozens and dozens of questionnaires that are adjusted to specific business scenarios, specific data types that you work with this vendor, a specific size of the vendor, geographical location of the vendor. So we are covering a lot of different dimensions with this questionnaire, what we call our questionnaire library. And what is more important the system allows us and allows the users to tailor the weights to the weights of the scores to the particular business needs. The good thing of this is, of course, you don't need to be a regulatory expert to ask the right questions, because these questions are already in this library, and the AI system is able to pick up, the questions that you need to apply to different vendors and different scenarios. The other interesting thing is, as we are constantly in Pacific AI updating, the regulatory frameworks, we are scouting all the regulations across the globe. That means that we can translate that, and we do it with a specific component of our system that is called the regulatory abstraction. We are able to collect all these new regulations and transform them into specific questions that are included or are arranged in specific questions. So if you use this specific AI tool, you get the advantage of constantly updated assessments. Once the regulatory space change, that is changing a lot, in the last years. The other critical point or critical concept is the difference between questionnaire selection and scores, as I have mentioned before. So one thing is, I need to decide which questionnaires with questions with requirements I need to check for a vendor. That is one thing, and it's good to have a system that allows you to customize that or to find the right questions. But going beyond that, our system allows you to adjust not only the questions but the scores. What kind of things, once you have selected this questionnaire, what kind of things are more or less important for a particular business scenario, and that is something that we support in the design of our tool. So you have for the same questions, you can have different evaluations because the situation, the use case is different. That is something that is supported by design. And of course, we also have this idea of we need this deterministic logic on top. We use LLMs, of course, you will see how we use it, but we need some kind of deterministic behavior of the system, so you can compare vendors in a reliable way, because the business logic that you are applying to make the risk assessment is deterministic. It's not just prompting an LLM and hoping that it gives us the right risk assessment. That won't work. We need some deterministic rules here. This is the same that we are trying to illustrate here. We have what we call the hybrid intelligence. So we use the LLMs that are very powerful, technology mostly to find the evidence, to process the documentation. That is an unstructured source of information. That is where LLMs excel, and that is what we use. That is where we use the LLMs mostly in our tool, is to identify the evidence to answer the questions. But once you answer the question, how you score it is something that we don't leave to the LLM. We prefer to an approach where with that decision of which questions are more or less important, how much important is this answer in this particular scenario, is something that we code in a more deterministic way with our library of questionnaires, and we don't just use the LLM to do that work. And of course, another critical component of the Pacific AI brain is the registry of the human in the loop. So in every step, we save time to the human, but in every step we have a human reviewing. The human can take control in any case, and we track in a very detailed form. We track all the activities of the human. So in case of any problem in the future, we can see which decisions were made by the human, which decisions were made by which agents, not just by the AI, but which agents. That help us to, to audit and to improve the system with the feedback of the human interacting with it. At the end, as a summary of this webinar, we believe that if we provide with automation plus the expertise that the questionnaire library provides, and the trust that comes from the fact that there's always human in the loop and everything is audited and logged, we think we can get to the confidence required to decide with which vendors you want to work and which mitigation controls you want to put in place when working with specific vendors. So now it's time to any questions. If you have any question, please let me know. You can use the chat to make the questions if you want. So looks like I don't see any question. So we are done. Thank you for attending. Any additional question, comment, idea, please contact me. You have my email in the slide. I will be happy to contact and talk about this exciting area of development. Thank you very much.